Hi, I'm Dr. Courtney, Jesus Professor, and in this episode of DarkAngels 101, I'm discussing why I don't read C.S. Lewis fantasy material. Scripture repeatedly describes idolatry and witchcraft as spiritual adultery. For example, in Isaiah 57, Yahweh says, "But come here, you sons of a sorceress, you offspring of adulterers and prostitutes. Who are you mocking? At whom do you sneer and stick out your tongue? Are you not a brood of rebels, the offspring of liars? You burn with lust among the oaks and under every spreading tree. You sacrifice your children in the ravines and under the overhanging crags. The idols among the smooth stones of the ravines are your portion. Indeed, they are your lot. Yes, to those idols you have poured out drink offerings and offered grain offerings. In view of all this, Yahweh says, should I relent? You have made your bed on a high and lofty hill, and there you went to offer your sacrifices. Behind your doors and your doorposts you have put your pagan symbols." Yahweh goes on in Isaiah, "Forsaking me, you uncovered your bed. You climbed into it and opened it wide. You made a pact with those whose beds you love. You looked with lust on their naked bodies. You went to Molech with olive oil and increased your perfumes. You sent your ambassadors far away. You descended to the very realm of the dead." Yahweh goes on, "You wearied yourself by such going about, but you would not say, 'It is hopeless.' You found renewal of your strength so that you did not faint. Whom have you dreaded and feared, that you have not been true to me, to Yahweh, nor taken this to heart? Is it not because I have long been silent that you do not fear me? I will expose your righteousness and your works, and they will not benefit you. When you cry out for help, let your collection of idols save you." Yahweh finishes, "The wind will carry all of them off. A mere breath will blow them, your idols, away." Since the Bible so clearly describes idolatry and the occult as spiritual adultery, I regard fantasy literature about witchcraft and the occult as spiritual pornography. In the same way that I avoid sexual porn as high risk for capturing my heart and fueling lusts for sinful sex, I avoid fantasy literature as spiritual porn. I see it as high risk for capturing my heart and fueling lusts for spiritual power achieved through the idolatry, witchcraft, and the occult practices portrayed in the fantasy literature. I am trying to obey the biblical imperative to guard my heart above all else, for it is the wellspring of life. The claim of underlying metaphors relating occult fantasy literature to Christianity are no more compelling for me than claims that sexual porn would somehow teach me something of value for biblical intimacy within marriage. It's absurd to claim you should watch or you should read porn to understand God's intent for intimacy between husband and wife. Likewise, it is absurd to claim you should watch or read occult fantasy to better understand God's design for intimacy between Jesus and his people. Proponents of Christian fantasy literature have sometimes quoted Acts 14, where Paul says that God has not left himself without testimony among the pagan nations. Proponents of Christian fantasy infer from this that the pagan and occult religions were some way of God revealing himself to the Gentiles in preparation for the gospel. This is a grave error on several counts. The first reason this is a grave error is that Paul is explicitly talking about rain and crops and food and joy in the immediate context of Acts 14. The second reason this is a grave error is that the Bible is clear that the sacrifices of pagans are offered to demons, not to God, and he does not want us to be participants with demons. The third reason why this is clear is the Bible is unambiguous that rather than reveal God, idolatrous and occult practices bring us further from the Lord and are the reason that people are given over to shameful lusts and sexual perversions. This is Romans chapter 1. Since the spiritual adultery of idolatry and occult practices leads to shameful lusts and sexual perversions, I have no more interest in reading fantasy literature that celebrates idolatry and the occult any more than I have an interest in watching sexual pornography. I do not believe it is really about Jesus and Yahweh when it celebrates spiritual powers by other names and when it celebrates forbidden occult practices. As God says, I am Yahweh, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another or my praise to idols. As Yahweh says, as God says, I am Yahweh, that is my name. I will not give my glory to another or my praise to idols.
Take you out, sure.